Pod Connect channel. My name is Juliet Karanja. Welcome to the learning series of Why Psychology. In the first part, we actually talked about the psychology is a science. And that was very specific because it is a study, the scientific study of behavior and mental processes, the overt and covert behavior. And so we learned how it would be important to address how it is overt and covert behavior understood. And then we went further and talked about the goals of psychology. Why then do we learn psychology? And we talked that it benefits us in understanding how to describe behavior. It helps us to understand behavior, and also it helps us to predict behavior. And so we looked at that from the first part. And today we are going to be talking about the fields of psychology. It's a very broad field. When you talk about psychology, we are talking about various departments or various schools that inform the entire discipline of psychology. So several types of psychologists that exist. We have the cognitive psychologists, and that word cognitive psychology, is a study in a nutshell of humans. Is a study the way humans perceive and understand the world around them. How do you perceive? Your cognitive is your perception. How do you interpret what it is that you have observed? How do you interpret how it is you relate with the environment that you are in? It is a very perceptual experience. It is the study of the ways that humans perceive and understand the world around them. The world around us today has changed. We have a different norm. The things that we did before and the things that we do now. Some of us have learned how to wear masks. And so that is how actually psychology can help us to understand. Remember, it is about the behavior and mental processes. So how are people behaving in their perception? How is perception informing how people behave? How is perception informing how people relate and are thinking? How does that affect the way you adjust to the thinking patterns of everyday life? Because we see behavior, but we do not see what you think. By the time we actually see and relate with your behavior, so many things have happened. You have had a feeling, you have had an emotion, and that emotion has made you feel, you thought something, and then you had a feeling, and then the feeling informed your behavior. And so this is a pattern that is unseen. It's a covert experience of behavior. And so we should not lose sight that psychology being the scientific study of behavior and mental processes. So cognitive psychologists, they endeavor to help us to understand why is it that we perceive the way we do in our behavior and in our thinking patterns. Then we go to the physiological psychologists most of them we call them the physiological psychologists. This is the study of the role of the brain functions in the behavior. So when you talk about the brain, the mental processes, is actually about the brain. There's a lot we can talk about the structure of the brain and how behavior is informed by the structure and the morphology of the brain. We have so many things that happen underneath. By the time you actually want to go and go to the bathroom, it is behind the scenes that it is your physical body that has been informed by your brain to take you to the bathroom. We have hormones that are produced by your brain, even to inform whether it is you're a male or you're female, that inform our gender concept. It informs our sexuality concepts. So there's a lot that we can talk about the brain. And so the psychological psychologists help us to study the brain. Neuroscience psychologists also are in this particular field. They help us to understand why is it that we behave the way we do in relations to the brain. When we talk about the cortex, when we talk about the amygdala, we talk about all these aspects of the brain that inform our emotions, our feelings, and ultimately our behavior. Because we are going to be studying this to be able to understand why is it that people behave the way they do and what informs the way they behave. What motivates them to behave the way they behave. And so this is very interesting because it's not just only as for those who do it as a profession, but it's also very key for those who actually do it, if you adopt it or embrace it for your everyday life. Why would you be, so you'll be able to understand why is it that I'm experiencing a lot of anxiety? Why am I feeling anxiety? So you can be able to think about why it is that you're feeling anxiety. And so that is why psychologists, physiological psychologists help us to do. Then we also have the developmental psychologists. I love these ones because they study individuals' growth and change throughout their lives. We have a lot of information about when we are pre-birth and when we are born, and when we actually are developing as children, childhood, and then we talk about early adolescence, puberty, and then we're talking about early adulthood, and we're talking about late adulthood, and then we're talking about the old age. That is a whole lifespan, and we have a lot of data. Remember, scientific study is also developed from scientific methods. And so there's a lot of information that has been observed and collected in order to help us to articulate and understand how children, how a person is actually, how conception happens. There's a lot of contention, there's a lot of conflict, and actually this disconnect between various worldviews where when does life begin, when does life start? And so from a psychological point of view, you get to understand about the person in conception, the person in pre-birth, the person at birth, the person at the developmental stage of childhood, the person at the developmental of adolescence and puberty, and so on and so on. And so that is what the developmental psychologists will do. They will help you to understand why is it that children behave the way they do? What is so crucial about that stage of conception? You as a parent who wants to conceive, what is it that you need to do? What is it that you need to understand in terms of the psychological part of it, the developmental part of it, in order to be able to secure a healthy baby? What is it that you need to do even at birth to be able to secure a healthy baby? And so psychologists who do developmental psychologists really can help you to understand and be able to help us to articulate. And we also have the social psychologists. These are very brilliant people who can help us to study how people influence and are influenced by others. I mean, this is the time when we have a lot of group think. We are thinking because we are all in the same almost predicament, and it is a global predicament. And it's a unique one because we probably haven't been in this predicament all at the same time. And so the social psychologists will help us to understand how we as a person, as individuals, is individually and as in groups and in families and in societies are influenced by others. This is where people will understand how intimacy, how are you influenced by the levels of intimacy, in how are you influenced, or how do you influence, what is the interplay between what it is that I have allowed to influence, to be influenced, and to influence. What are my capacities as an individual? What are my competencies as an individual in a social concept or in a social context? So that even helps you to understand the schooling years when a child is being transitioned from home to school, when they are beginning to start school. So you can be able to prepare your child how it is that they are influenced and how they will be influenced in a social setting. And so that even in a new job, you are acquiring a new job. That is the social psychology, will help you to understand how is it that I am aware. Am I aware of some of the internal processes that are happening where others are concerned? Because in essence, we are not in isolation as human beings. We relate with ourselves, we relate with the environment, and we relate with others. And so the social psychologists are key in helping us understand how we are influenced by the environment and we are influenced by others. And so I'd like to just run through school psychologists. These are very important psychologists. They test and evaluate students and analyze learning problems and counsel teachers and parents. They help in development of curriculums that actually are very much tailored for particular developmental stages and particular developmental crises, and so that the children can be transitioned and gain virtues from one developmental stage and to the other. And so it's very critical for them in a school setting, because it's different from a home setting, to be able to create the environment and to create learning tools and learning skills and be able to help the children. And not just create the to create the curriculum. It is also to help children to be able to adjust in such a setting. and identify certain problems and certain crises that children are going through. One of them is learned helplessness. In school, psychologists really do help us to understand why it is that there are children who are actually having problems, why are teachers having problems, why are students and parents having problems? Could the problems be coming from home and from school? So I'd like to just run through industrial organization psychologists. This work on a wide variety of issues at the work setting. So all the psychological issues about behavior and mental processes are handled from the industrial psychologists. We can also talk about forensic psychologists. They work on behavior issues on legal and judicial and correctional systems. These are very key from our prison settings and our government settings that will be able to help to be able to rehabilitate and to be able to reconstruct the person's perspectives. Remember, it's a perception, so that they can be able to be rehabilitated into society and be able to be effective. And so we also talk about health psychologists. They focus on ways to improve our health, and they also are altering behavior. And this is it can be a combination of 2 or 3 perspectives or 2 or 3 disciplines. You can have a cognitive psychologist who is also a social psychologist, and in essence they help you develop health and improve your health. And we can also talk about the sports psychologists. They help you factor in the influence of performance in sports and physical and activity and exercises. And that, in a nutshell, helps you to understand the various fields of the discipline of psychology in any case where you feel you can get the best help that you can get. And so thank you, and we'll connect with you in our section 3.